Don't start
Okay,
there.
okay, okay,
Don't start
okay,
there.
okay, okay.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Let's start in Philly.
Okay, let's start
In
in Philly.
Philly.
All right, y'all want to go back?
Exactly.
Yeah, I want to go back to
'Cause
Philly.
there's a lot
Okay.
of people out here
And-
who are just
and-
at the beginning.
And how drama started.
All right, cool. So, take it back for those who don't know, because I've been living in Atlanta for over 2 decades now. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Germantown, to be exact, between Germantown and West Philly. You know, my story starts simply like, you know, I grew up in a hip hop generation. I remember Run DMC first doing their thing and wanting some Adidas and trying to get my parents to, cop me some, and they actually didn't get me the ones with the 3 stripes, and I was salty going to school and everything. Um, you know, my I feel like for me, it was really the movie Juice. I went to go see the movie Juice when I was in middle school, about to go to high school, and that was the first time I ever saw like a DJ on a big screen, like, really doing this thing, and like actually visualizing and seeing, Omar Epps' character GQ, cutting and scratching and making a demo tape and going to a battle and everything. And I feel like a lot of DJs that are around my age have kind of a similar story, that Juice was a big inspiration for them. I've heard Green Lantern say the same thing. And, I convinced my mom to buy me one turntable and a mixer. And I basically just started like with one turntable and a mixer. And, around that same time, my sister, my older sister, had brought me to New York during the summertime. And I went to 125th Street in Harlem when they used to have, everybody would have the vendors outside and, be selling
Oh, Harlem.
everything. And I bought my first mixtape, and it was a collection of mixtapes at the time. They would just have the names on them, and I bought this tape, DJ SNS Old School Part 2. And the reason why I bought that tape is because when I first started like buying records, I would save my lunch money and I would buy records. And the songs that SNS had on that tape, I didn't have the vinyl for, so I bought that tape, and it changed my life. I mean, I knew it from beginning to end. I was fascinated by how S was, putting this shit together, how he was cutting everything he was saying on the tape. And that started my fascination with like mixtape culture. Around that time, Clue was becoming Clue. I remember going to high school and feeling like I was ahead of the curve because I had a Clue tape, and he had records on there that people weren't aware of. And I started making my own mixtapes around this time. There was a DJ named Doo-Wop who made a tape called 95 Live, and I made a version called Illadelph. I basically bit the shit out of Doo-Wop and made a Philly version called Illadelph. And around this time, it was this group that was heralded around Philly. They had been doing a thing. They got a record deal with Geffen, and they were called the Roots. And they, I used to see Questlove on South Street. Um, Black Thought used to, be around and everything, and I was still a little younger than they were. They were a couple of years ahead of me in age, but it was because of watching the Roots get a record deal and seeing them perform and watching their video be on Yo MTV Raps and Rap City, that I was like, man, you can really do this shit. Like, this shit can really happen. Like, I watched it in front of my eyes. These guys that used to play on South Street now are on television and opening up for the Fugees and situations like that. So I was doing my thing in Philly, had a little name for myself, and then it was time for me to. I was graduating school. I was looking at various colleges and everything. I took a trip to Atlanta with my father around the time Outkast was putting out that album, and I just I felt like Atlanta, like. If anybody's been down there, if people of color, black and brown people, like we run the city, and it was just a different energy and a different feel, and I felt like, okay, this is a good place for me to not only go to school but also be able to do my thing. So I went to Atlanta and attended Clark Atlanta University, and that's how I got there.
All right.
That's fire.
Shout out to CAU in the building.
It's very important that Atlanta chapter in your life, because to be honest with you, since New York was always like East Coast and a New York based thing, and the mixtape culture and Clue and Bounce Master, and Ron G and that whole culture, but when it came to Atlanta, like honestly, for me, coming from New York, going to Atlanta a lot, is when you hit Atlanta and you start first hearing the buzz of like the mixtape culture down there and like what you were doing down there, the drops that you had were epic. You know what I'm saying? Some of those things are legendary.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And like, I want to know like, what's the point when you were sitting there? Because I remember looking at that Jeezy tape. Because then my first introduction to you was that Jeezy shit. I ain't even gonna front.
Trap or
You know what I'm
Die?
saying? Like it wasn't Trap or Die. It was
The one before.
that.
Streets is Watching.
Streets is Watching.
Okay.
And they had this video where Jeezy had the SK. You know what I'm saying? He was like cocking it and shit, jumped in a Lambo. I was like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? And then I went to Atlanta like a week later, and I went to Patchwork Studios. All these Jeezy flies. And she was like, who the fuck is this? You know what I'm saying? And I kept hearing dramatic affiliates. Like, you know what I'm saying? These ill-ass drops. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, who is this? But it's the culmination of that inspiration from the New York mixtape culture and also talking about the Atlanta, like how did you mesh that together? Because as a New York guy going to Atlanta for years, I ain't still figured it out like you did.
Right.
I still feel like a stranger in Atlanta. I really don't adapt. I don't even understand the language half the time. I just say yes. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, let's roll it.
That's a good question. I mean, again, I think when the story is told and it's put in perspective for history, I think it's very important that, this kid from Philly moves to Atlanta and is a part of like, changing like Southern hip hop mixtape scene, what trap music was at that time. You know what I mean? Like, so when I got to Atlanta, like there was this crew called Big Oomp, DJ Jelly, DJ Monte, legends in the city, who pretty much had like the mixtape game on smash. Like they was killing shit, and I was hustling my tapes myself, like on campus. I would go to like Spelman or Georgia State, and I would set up my table, and I would have like all types of tapes. I would have like a up north tape. I would have a neo soul tape, a reggae tape, and people would be like, "Who's DJ Drama?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. I work for the guy. He tells me to be here, and I'm here, and I sell his tapes." You know what I'm saying? Because I felt like they'd be like, "Oh, you're selling your own shit. I'm not buying that." So like I couldn't compete with what was going on up top when it came to up north tapes. Like, with rest in peace to my brother Slay, and with Clue and Who Kid and everybody was doing, like, I couldn't get to that music fast enough. So I was like, all right, let me focus on Southern hip hop. And at the time, I literally came up with the idea of Gangsta Grillz just sitting around playing with words in my crib. And it sounded like two words that felt good together, you know what I'm saying? And when I started making the mixtapes, I was paying attention to what Dipset was doing, what 50 was doing, what Who Kid, what Green Lantern was doing. Like, and I was like loving it, you know what I mean? And what was going on in the South at the time wasn't that. I remember somebody telling me, like, listen, if you make a tape and it has Southern hip hop on it, they don't want to hear people screaming and talking and freestyles and new music and none of that. And I was like, man, fuck all that. I'm gonna do it this way. So I literally took a formula that was popular up north, and I applied it to Southern hip hop. And then at the same time, I was feeling like it was a time when, with all due respect to what crunk music was, like people weren't looking at artists in the South and giving them their just due when it came to lyrics and what we consider like hip hop outside of the South, or what party music was. So I wanted to, like, I was putting people like Killer Mike and T.I. and Big Boy and Outkast and people like that on tapes and having them host them and following the formula that was going on outside of up north, and it worked. Next thing I know, I got with Tip. I met T.I. very early on when I got out of school, and I was like, okay, here's somebody that, I always knew the importance of a DJ and an artist connection and how that could be just studying hip-hop history, whether it be Eric B. and Rakim or Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince or 50 and Who Kid or, slaying what Dipset was doing, So Tip gave me the opportunity to do, like, one project, one Gangsta Grillz with just one artist and T.I. was the first one that I did that with, and that's really how the Gangsta Grillz mixtape series became what it is.
That was the PSC one.
That was the PSC, in the streets meets Gangsta Grillz.
Was that the moment you realized this could be a viable business, or was this still like a passion project, hobby?
I didn't have no job, or no quote unquote real job. Like when I got out of college, I was hustling my mixtapes. I was still kind of working in the clubs a little bit, but for me, it was like the mixtape was just a calling card. It always felt so much bigger as a DJ to make mixtapes, because I knew how much they traveled, and when I think about mixed DJs, to me, the ones that I always looked towards were always ones that were in mixtape culture. You know what I mean? So.
Were you trying to make money, or you was trying to?
Oh, I was definitely trying to make money for sure.
So when was the time that you felt you could scale this into a business? Was it when you got into the industry, when you became an A&R? Like, what was the moment? Was it when you got knocked by the feds? Like, what was the moment you figured you could turn this into $1 million business for yourself?
It was definitely before the feds. It was like I was moving mixtapes and everything, and Gangsta Grillz was becoming a thing. I still had for a time period felt like the bootleggers were making more money than I was, and then I kind of put myself, I hired somebody to work for me, and they kind of helped me put a system together, and I just started to see my bank account go up and up and up and up, and it was something brand new for me. It went from 4 figures to 5 figures to 6 figures, and I was like, I'm on to something.
Because I'm just going off the rumor. I heard that Trap or Die was over. It was gold in the streets. Like over 500,000 physical mixtapes circulating through the South. So that's a lot of fucking money.
Yeah, I didn't make
a lot of $10 CDs.
I didn't make all that money, but I mean, there was a lot of those were given away as well. But you think, even if I was selling CDs wholesale, back then you would sell a CD for you could get like $3, $4, you know what I mean, wholesale. People were buying like 600, 800 of them, every store off at the time. So, I was...
Or sell the master, right?
Yeah, I kind of came after the master era a little bit, but, that was a little option too. So, I just started, next thing I look up and, I'm making 40, 50, 60, 70 grand a month off of mixtapes.
And you're still in school?
But
I'm out of school already.
You got to figure, he was one of the people in the midst of that era that was responsible for shifting hip-hop to Atlanta in the South. Like, it came from the crunk music, and then it went right into the Jeezy era, into the Drama era. Like, it was so instrumental that this is why I reached out to Drama to do the Gangsta Grillz back in 05 or 06, because Gangsta Grillz was hitting so much that his shit was hitting on L.A., Miami, the South, New York. It was like, that was like he turned himself into the go-to. If you could get a Gangsta Grill going, you was going to pop. That helped a lot of artists turn into gold and platinum artists after doing Gangsta Grill mixtapes.
And they also got deal flow because of that.
Yeah, Gangsta Grillz became synonymous with the rollout. You know what I mean? It was like, all right, if you have a new artist and he's signing to a major label, it'd be like, you got to get him in Double XL. You got to get him on 106 in Park. You got to get a Gangsta Grillz. Like, I literally became part of the marketing plan. You know what I'm saying? And, at a time where it started out as, just Southern artists, then I was able to branch out. And then, artists outside of Atlanta started to reach out to me, like Jim. I've done a tape with so many people, I don't even know where to start. But I was, Pharrell was calling me to do a Gangsta Grillz. And
did you have a selection criteria, or was anybody who wanted to get down?
Well, interestingly enough, when I first started it, it was a Southern mixtape series, and then next thing you know, people who weren't Southern artists or trap artists started wanting Gangsta Grillz. So I remember when Pharrell called and said, I want to do a Gangsta Grillz, there were certain people that looked at me like, what? You're going to do a Gangsta Grillz with Pharrell? Or Little Brother called to do a Gangsta Grillz. It was like, Little Brother, how does this make sense? And I was like, all right, watch this.
That's interesting.
You feel what I'm saying? And I'm like, I come from the cloth.
gonna make it happen.
Yeah, everything. I live and breathe hip hop. Like I'm gonna make this shit work, and watch how my shit sounds with Pharrell on it, a little brother, or when I take it up top, and me and Jim made a classic, which was actually the last tape I made right before the feds came and got me.
Boom.
I was riding around listening to 7 Day. He
He
had nothing to do with it.
I had that work.
But that's how big we had gotten. You know what I'm saying?
Nah,
And
you was
doing the
ultra
7 Day theory, like
retarded. But now here's another question. So, was it all the work you put in the mixtape circuit the reason that you ended up getting a job inside of one of the labels? Which was the first label that you got hired at?
So the way it really happened was Tip was already signed to Atlantic. Gangsta Grillz had gotten so hot that I started getting offers at major labels literally across the board. I feel like I met with SRC, I met with Loud. I think Def Jam had offered me something. I had various people offering me like an album deal at the time, and because of my loyalty to Grand Hustle and the Tip, and us coming up together, I did my original deal over at Atlantic. So I wound up in that system over there, and it was at a time when like Michael Kaiser and Julie Greenwald had left over at Def Jam and went to Atlantic. Craig Kalman was over there. And so I did my first 2 albums in the Atlantic system. The situation happened with the feds, and Atlantic was like, "Oh, you can't pay for this type of promotion." They was like, "How fast can you get the album done?" So I did 2 albums over there, and then I wound up leaving. I wound up leaving Atlantic and going to E1, and then doing a couple albums over there. But I was still kind of using some of my people that had worked with me over at Atlantic. And because of the success that I started to have with my own records and the albums that I was doing, the opportunity presented itself for me to go back to Atlantic, but as an A&R. During this time, I started building a studio in Atlanta called Mean Street Studios.
Exactly.
So when I was building Mean Streets, I went to Atlantic and was like, "Oh, by the way, beyond hiring me as an A&R, I also have this facility that might come in handy for y'all if y'all want to, partner up and be partners and have a spot in Atlanta."
Now let's talk about the business of that, because this is what this show is all about. The finesse. Now,
that definitely
because
was
I
finesse.
know all about the finesse, because I built my own studio in New York that I had for 8 years. But the way you did it was wow, and it's still wow because it's still there. Like, so
Absolutely.
let's not downplay. You built a compound that was like the #1 spot for anybody that had an artist coming to Atlanta to be a part of this step in the building, just to be there, to even give you a high five or get on the radio show or make a record or just anything around still to this day.
Right.
You dig? But the science in doing that and making the label end up cutting checks for that is phenomenal. So I want you to break that down.
I mean, like Jim said, as I was building it, it's like I always say it's like Field of Dreams. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, but that movie is inspiring in a sense because it's like the concept of that movie is if you build it, they will come. When I first started building Mean Streets, I was doing the shit out of my pocket. You know what I mean?
And you had mad competition with like.
I mean, yeah, it's 1,000 studios in Atlanta. Atlanta's a studio hub. It's studios all around. And for me, the first thing I did was built my radio room, and where I do my Sirius Shade 45 show from. So it was a way for me to invite people there because they would come to my show, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I got a studio room over here, and I'm building one over here down the hallway." So then people would come and be like, "Okay, cool, let me book some time." So when I went to Atlantic and told them, and me becoming an A&R over there, when it came to Mean Streets, I was able to have them pay for me to build the rest of the studio out.
Because it's to their advantage as well.
I mean, they're partners with me, so I was able to use the label's money to finish building a studio and to finish building a building that at first I was using my money, and then their money came in, and I look up and I'm like, "Oh, bet this worked out perfectly."
The funny thing is that honestly, we're looking at you and Jim, is like you guys are executives, like you are chief executives, and really to use this to any artist that's out there, to be able to use that hustle, to be able to make the system work for you. And you have 2 cases right here, because I've been at Jim's studio. He had this shit for like 10 years. You know what I'm saying? I've been to Mean Streets, and I watched that you guys basically created a catch-all for all the young talent that was clueless or didn't have a way to go or a place or a home, and these resulted in quality projects, and some of these projects turned into careers, you know. So my whole thing is like, you know, when I'm thinking about you as this chief executive that took his passion, turned his passion into a business, and turned that business into a brand, leveraged that brand. With that leverage, you were able to then turn around and leverage the fact that you had the access to the talent, had the labels pay you for it, you know what I'm saying? And then turn around and create damn near Grammy-winning projects, award-winning projects over and over again, and then have the streets on lock. You know, so it's really a fantastic story.
The key word you said in that, all that was brand.
That brand,
right?
Your brand, you built your brand.
I wanted to ask you. So as we move into the future of music, right? We have all kinds of new technology, new revenue streams, NFTs. Like the whole industry is changing. Everything is changing in the world, and it feels like now artists have to be more than artists. They have to be brands.
Right.
Were you thinking about that back then?
I was thinking about that early on. Like even when I think about like when I went to school for like mass communications, radio, TV, film. But for me, the most important class was my marketing class. Oh. Like when I was in my marketing class, it was like I was learning so much about just how I could use that to my advantage for my mixtape hustle.
What's something that you learned that you held forever that took you to the next level?
I ain't gonna lie, I forget them now, but there's something called the 4 Ps. I don't remember what they stand for, but somebody in here might know. But you
anybody know the 4 Ps?
You can look them up, but I learned that in marketing, and I was able to apply the 4 Ps to everything that I was doing with my mixtape hustle, you know, at that point. And then just beyond that, like, you know, early on, even with the mixtapes, like I knew how important it was, like the cover and you know the whole packaging was. Like my goal was, if somebody went into a store and they saw a DJ Drama Gangsta Grillz, they didn't need to know what was on it.
Right.
They just wanted that because it said Gangsta Grillz.
Is it preparation prevents poor performance?
I think so. I think that's what it is.
What was that?
See, yeah.
Proper preparation prevents poor performance. It's the 5 Ps, I think.
Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Thank. We got a real one over
Shout
here.
Shout to Capo.
Yeah. So early on, like branding, I knew the importance of branding. Like even for me, it was like, all right, I'm gonna make Gangsta Grillz a brand before people even know who DJ Drama was. People knew Gangsta Grillz before they knew who I was. Before they knew what I looked like, none of that. Like, people didn't know what I looked like until the Jeezy Trap or Die DVD.
So in this day and age,
they thought I looked like Beef. Like,
honestly, I thought you looked like Beef.
Yeah, like that. When they heard my voice on the tape,
I thought you was like a fat,
they thought I looked like Beef.
Black, dark-skinned man, you know, with a bald head, and headphones on all the time.
So let me ask, in this day and age, what's more important, selling a product or the brand?
What's more important, selling a product or a brand? When it comes to music?
To the music business, so or any artists out here.
You need the product to sell to make the brand.
What happened?
You need the product to sell to make the brand.
Yeah, you need the product. I mean,
the more
music.
product you
does the
sell
brand
makes
sell the
the brand.
product?
The music is still almost.
After you sell product, like you have to start from somewhere. So you got to sell product, or you got to give out samples.
But now with streaming and everything, people are not even selling products.
But the product still got to be of quality.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to have the product.
Music.
You got to have the music.
Yes,
like
music is still the end all be all.
At the end of the day, the music is gonna speak for itself.
So I feel like sometimes the personality and the characters take precedence over the music sometimes.
It helps. I mean, but you know, at the end of the day, we're in a music business. If you think about anybody that has longevity, you can have all the character and all the what you want, but you need that music to sustain and you know, and then, continue on.
And then after you have that music that builds the brand, then people will trust the brand and they'll start taking whatever you.
I mean, you see it.
I mean, Jim is a perfect example.
That's how I got my deal with the Diplomat thing, because I wanted $1 million from Rockefeller when they signed the Diplomats and gave Jewels and the Diplomats all that money. They dubbed me on that million. But I always told Cam, like, they don't care about where Diplomats is at. People want to see Diplomats. They're going to buy what Diplomats got.
And that was the brand.
That's how we went into Koch.
Wherever y'all was at.
Independent deal with Koch, because they was going to still come buy them Diplomat records. And that ended up helping us get into the independent lane, what helped me make a shitload of money more than most major artists was making.
I mean, shit, Dipset had a legendary run, like seriously. And to be honest with you, like let's say like between 2002 to 2008, like you guys showed us like as like I'm not an artist, but for the artists in the room, you showed us a real blueprint on how to do it. And even though there's things talk about buzzwords like metaverse, Web3, NFTs, whatever, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to the principal core. You got to have great product, and you got to know how to brand it to sell it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And like my one question I have for you is like, when you were doing the Gangsta Grillz shit, did you ever see you be able to create a global brand that would result in a Grammy win?
Yeah,
Nah,
shout
that-
out. Let's get a clap for the
Can we
Grammy.
give the guy? He fucking
Thank
won a
you.
Grammy off a
Grammy.
fucking mixtape, B.
Thank you. Shout out to
shout
Tyler, the creator.
Yeah. Shout him too.
The
Yeah.
genius mind. Nah, I didn't see it going this far. I mean, I just wanted to get my name on a flyer. That was my only goal, honestly. Like
Damn.
when I started DJing. So if somebody would have told me like the mixtape series that I started in Fort in Atlanta, you know, and in this little duplex crib, and I had artists come through and do freestyles would one day be Grammy Award-winning. I didn't see that, you know. You know, and it's just to tell you, sky's the limit. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't see Gangsta Grillz turning into an album. I didn't see me being here, part of Generation Now, and having two of the biggest artists in hip hop, you know, to date.
Top
you know
of the charts right now.
So
All right, so they tell
Jack
us
Harlow,
Nah,
come
he's-
home. The
we
kids
gotta-
miss
we
you.
gotta
Comes out
wrap.
tonight.
We gotta
matter of
go.
fact.
I want yes, they telling us we gotta. But before we go, I just want
We didn't even
everybody to
talk
make
about
sure y'all go check out Mine and
NFTs,
Diamonds.
Yeah.
Check out Mine and Diamonds. We have more extensive conversations about
Yeah.
the business. But before we wrap, I just want to ask
Yes.
both of you guys, y'all were creatives. Y'all were hey, we're not going yet.
Okay.
You're not going yet.
Okay.
So y'all are artists now turned executives, right? Is there anything that you can say to these people out here who want to make money in this industry? What are some of the new tools and resources that they have available to them that you see that you're employing in your business, that you're doing with your artists? Like, what's something they could do today, put them on a path to generating income, big time?
You want to go, Jim?
It may sound cliche, but we've been talking about it. It's 10% music, 90% business, but you need that 10% music to get that 90% business, meaning that it's going to all start with the music, but be smart
Right.
about it because there are so many different things that are available to artists that we didn't have when we was coming up, such as the internet and social media, and we watching these kids get rich and $1 million deals off of piping up, off of getting they weight up on social media platforms. So listen, it's all there for you. Like, there's no rules for this. It's like the Wild Wild West. What the kids have created is something that we're going to take for generations. Like, that's something that the major record labels had to catch up on because the kids figured out how to manipulate the streams in their own favor. So it works for all of us now. The blueprint is right in front of you. Don't slip. Be realistic with yourself, though. If your music ain't hitting, don't play yourself. But this is the music industry. There's plenty of ways for you to get just as rich as most of these artists out here without having to rap. Trust me when I tell you that.
That's real shit.
Because I don't rap.
You know,
But
and I
I'm
was
up
just going
here.
to say the same thing. You know, it's really about trusting the process. I mean, we all know how many platforms are out here with social media, with, you know, the TikTok, and they talk about algorithms and, you know, the numbers and all that. And all that is good, but at the end of the day, it's about a good product. It's about the music, you know what I'm saying? It's about what you're putting in front of people and making it longevity, being able to sustain and be here for a long period of time. And, you know, I'm a prime example of reinvention. You know, I started out doing mixtapes as a DJ. I now run a record label, Generation Now, with two artists, you know, Lil Uzi Vert, Jack Harlow, Seti
Major
Hendrix.
artists.
Major
Poppin'.
artists. You know, we dropping an
Poppin'.
album now, so, you know, if you love this shit, you're gonna get your chance. You're gonna get your opportunity, and when you get your opportunity, when you get your chance, don't drop the ball.
Please
Keep
don't.
going.
You know what they say, when you can't stay motivated, stay consistent. You heard me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate